Hey, good afternoon, Mohit.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi, Mohit.
Hey, Ned, it's you.
Hi, thanks for coming on our podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to hear your elevator pitch on Cohesity.
So I like to say that, we start by being just a great backup platform for doing enterprise backups. But we truly are a platform that can do way more. I think the best way to look at us is to maybe draw an analogy to maybe something like Google. Google internally is a platform, but the first thing that Google did on that platform was Google search.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, they also have Gmail and they have YouTube and Google Maps and a variety of other stuff. So similarly, Cohesity is a platform for enterprise data management. We start by being a great backup, right? Data protection. So what search was to Google, backups is to us. But then we go on to also be a filer platform, right? We can do NAS, distributed NAS, NFS and SMB. We can be object storage. We can do S3. We can be the platform for doing test and development or analytics. We can also be the platform that connects a customer's data center and the cloud and provide a hybrid world for them. So that is what Cohesity is. It's a platform that spans their multi-cloud environment and then gives them the ability to run apps and services. Backups is just the first one.
I watched and listened to a bunch of your different interviews that you've done over the last couple of years. And I think one of the, I don't remember which one it was on, but you had talked about when you're starting a company, you need to have a entry point that, you know, is going to be successful. And then you need to have the long-term vision figured out as well. And I thought that was really interesting because you do see a lot of companies that either have some great idea, but then they don't have anything else, or they have the opposite problem of they're trying to build this great vision and they don't have anything to start with. And I thought, obviously, you guys seem to be nailing that pretty nicely right now.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. I think it's kind of like likening it to maybe a plane taking off. You first need to take off, and then you need to gain. And so the entry point is kind of like taking off.
Yeah.
If you don't have an entry point, you will never take off. So that's the immediate thing you need to do. And in Cohesity's case, that's enterprise backups. But beyond that, there ought to be a bigger vision, because if you're just at the entry point, then, well, once you've done that and other competitors start copying you, you have nowhere else to go. And so you may come crashing down again.
Yeah.
And so that's the bigger vision of enterprise data management. Do more with this platform. It's not just a backup. The problem we solve because of that bigger picture is that of mass data fragmentation. Our data today is very fragmented into multiple silos. And by bringing all those into one platform, you can get rid of all those silos, those unnecessary copies, the need to manage it separately using different UIs, different vendors, all that goes away, right?
When you talk about mass data fragmentation, that sounds scary to a person that's worked with data for a long time. But what you're talking about is that a data in an enterprise is sort of locked in all these different applications, and you've got probably hundreds or thousands of the same stuff all over the place. Is that kind of where you're going with that?
Yeah, so today, when you buy a product from any vendor, it's just doing one or two things, that's it. And if you need to do something else, there's another product. And that's going to keep another copy of your data. For instance, backups is one product in the legacy world. Analytics is another one. Filers are yet another one. Anything you need to do for test and development is probably one more silo. So the net result of it is that your data gets fragmented. There is a copy sitting in the backups, and there's another one sitting in an analytics platform, and yet another one sitting on all those other platforms. And analysts like IDC estimate a typical organization has 6 to 10 unnecessary copies of your data. And not just that, but even when you put the data in the cloud, Amazons of the world aren't deduplicating your data. So you have fragments of data even there.
Right.
So this is the problem we refer to as mass data fragmentation. It's just fragments all over the place.
Yeah, and that 6 to 8 copies is probably low.
Yeah, that's the minimum.
Yeah.
The more complex the environment, the more the number of copies. And
Yeah.
so very soon you're not able to extract insights from this data. You don't know how many copies you have. You don't know why it's growing the way it is. So those are the problems that Cohesity was meant to solve. And sometimes, by the way, a different analogy, a simpler analogy that I draw is to a smartphone. A smartphone is a great phone, but truly it's a platform. Before the smartphone came, we all used to carry a phone, a music player, a camera, a GPS device, and so on and so forth. And the smartphone came, and all of that got consolidated on that one platform. And by the way, that platform also gives you a marketplace from where you can download apps and extend the power of that platform. So Cohesity is something similar. It's a platform for enterprise data management. We may start off by being a great backup. We believe we are the best in breed in doing backups. But once we've proven that to the customer, then we go do way more. I think we are partnered with EVOTEC, with this big financial customer. They started off, as you know, by using us for just backups. They replaced 6 backup products with us, right? And then they went on to replace their legacy NAS with us. And so that's one example of this vision in action.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So Mohit, there's the enterprise storage market's really crowded. There's a lot of competition, and a lot of your competitors are focusing, to me at least, very narrowly on maybe an approach that I call speeds and feeds. And I wonder if you would share with us a little bit about how you're looking at the market overall and how it's evolving, and how you think about positioning Cohesity to take you into the future.
So 2 ways. I think let's split the discussion on that entry point and the bigger vision. In the entry point itself, look at Google's entry point. It was search. But Google had to be the best in search before people looked at them on the other things. So we have, our entry point is backups. We have to be best at backups, and we are. I think a lot of our big wins against these competitors are testament to that. We are very enterprise grade. We have Google-like scalability, Apple-like manageability, and they just love us on how well we can just do that backups. It sounds simple, but backups are very complex. You have to back up all sorts of things, right? It's a 30-year-old thing, and there's virtualization environments, and there's databases, and there's physical servers, and there's NAS environments, and this and that version. But once we've proven to the customer that we are great at that, that's when the bigger vision also flies, because people in this day and age, they don't want to buy one more product. As you said, speed and feeds. Other competitors are maybe just trying to build a better backup. But what about everything else? Are they supposed to buy one more product for that filer or that analytics platform, or maybe building a hybrid cloud solution? So that's where Cohesity really excels. I think once the data is on Cohesity, you can extract value from that. You can do way more. You can leverage our marketplace to download apps and then extract value from your data, right? Maybe you want to find out some information for GDPR purposes. What do you do in a typical backup environment? Well, you can't do much because that environment is only going to do backups. In Cohesity's case, you can download apps and then figure out that information in place. You don't have to copy the data around. So those are some of the benefits we give, not just as that great entry point, but also as that bigger vision. And so that's why we win. Customers like us for the bigger vision, and they like us for what we can do as just backups. We're very enterprise grade. We beat the other competitors in both scalability, performance, features, and then we beat them on the vision and the robustness of this platform. So that's the secret behind our success and what's brought us this far.
So Mohit, I sorry to interrupt you. I managed and led among other things, a data protection and backup team for a long time for a Fortune 500 company, and I love having a CEO say that backups are hard because backups in a big, huge enterprise environment are really hard because you need to make sure they actually work and you can restore the data and all this other stuff. And it's some people kind of simplify it down to just like, hey, it's a backup. What's so complicated about it? But obviously, you know a lot more about it than most. But I thought that was nice to hear.
Thank you. I think backups is one place that probably touches most of your IT infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
A backup product has to interface with practically anything that touches data, be it a virtualization platform, be it a database, be it a mainframe computer, be it a physical server. So backup products have to interface with all of those. And by the way, different versions of those, right?
Yeah.
So backups are tough.
They also put all those things through their paces a lot of times. They're kind of the way that they test performance. They stress your environment. They do all these other things that are kind of you don't necessarily think about them most until you're like angry about it. That, oh, why did the backups take my application down or something? But
yeah, or when you need to recover from them, right? Yeah, that's when
right.
you need your backups the most, and that's where you're waiting weeks. Like I can't recover. We've had cases where people had to wait like over a week to recover their data, and that's loss in productivity, loss in business. And so that's where we can really provide value. We're really fast at storing data. We have this instant master store capability for virtualized environments. We can restore nearly instantly. And so that's why they like us. And so backups, they are way more complex than people think they are, and then they find out the hard way.
Yeah, give us some insight into why is the sort of the data platform and the data and the metadata separated? What does that do for you, for us, as a community or as a technical user or whatnot?
Yeah, I'll give you, so I'll answer both of those questions separately. I'll go to the data and metadata one first. So if you want this platform to be intelligent, if you want to be able to extract insights from this data that you have on this platform, then if you just keep the data and metadata, if you may, just kind of intertwined with each other, and you can't separate them, then what's going to happen is that to do anything with that metadata is going to take you as long as what it takes you to do with the data. And if the data is big, well, scanning through the metadata is also going to be slow.
Mm-hmm.
So by kind of keeping a logical separation, and then of course optimizing it in the architecture so you can actually get to your metadata fast, gives you a variety of desirable features. For instance, if you want to, let's say, quickly find out if a certain file is in there, and you can just now search through the metadata as opposed to going through the data. Another example is, let's say you're archiving the data to the cloud, and we all know that cloud bandwidths are kind of limited and it's kind of expensive to download all that data back. But what if you kept the metadata separate, and now you can, in order to know what files are there on the cloud and to be able to selectively retrieve just the blocks that you want, what if you were able to just look at the metadata, which is much smaller than the data, and now you can kind of fetch those blocks that you want as opposed to downloading all of the data and then looking through it. So those are some examples on how kind of keeping a separation between metadata and the data is important. And that's what, going back to your first one, so let's talk about the architecture. That's what our web scale file system does very well. So we call it SpanFS. That's the name of our file system. It kind of logically spans a customer's multi-cloud environment, right? And by maintaining a logical separation between the metadata and the data, it gives you abilities that you wouldn't have otherwise. If it was just a big blob of data, now to search through it is going to take you ages. It's going to be very, very slow. So now we can keep the metadata separate, and we can keep the hot metadata even on faster tiers of storage like SSDs, and we can fairly quickly search through that and extract important insights from that. And so it kind of really helps our customers extract insights from their otherwise dark data. We call it dark because in a legacy system, it's very hard to extract those insights. And so those are some examples on how the separation of metadata and data become important, and how our web scale file system SpanFS leverages that.
Very cool. Thank you.
So Mohit, we talked today about your entry point being backup, and that's the critical sort of table stakes for the enterprise. And then you described to us the file service modules. I don't know what to call them, but facilities that you've also included. Are you able to give us some insight into what else you guys might include in the platform as you move forward?
Yeah, so we call them services. So we have these two concepts, services and apps, by the way. So backups is a service, but then some services we can also access through apps that our customers can download through our marketplace. But in terms of other services, in apps, so beyond filer and backups, we also have the object storage service. So we can also expose our data through the S3 file system. We have the ability to run test and dev on the platform. Now, imagine in the legacy world, people have to either run test and dev on their production systems, which kind of competes with their production, or they have to set up one more silo, copy the data to it, and then do their test and development there, when their backup systems are sitting idle, doing nothing. So we are saying that why not clone that data on the backup system itself and allow your developers to do some test and dev in place. That's you can leverage your backup infrastructure and you don't have to create more copies. That's another one. Yet another one is the possibility to run some simple analytics on this platform, right? So if you need to extract insights, let's say for GDPR purposes, you can do it on the Cohesity platform. So you can download some apps or build an app yourself. We provide the SDKs and the framework for helping people build apps. Any app that can operate on data can be an app on us. We can port third-party apps on us. We can have custom apps be built on us. And so that's some of the power that Cohesity provides. I mean, literally, it's the sky is the limit when it comes to building apps and services, but those are some examples.
Are you seeing some pretty good adoption with folks building out the apps and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so let's just say we're at, where the iPhone, if I may use that example,
sure,
was in 2010. I think we are kind of there. So we have seeded the system. We have ported some apps on our own, built some apps on our own, and now we've opened up the ecosystem, kind of inviting partners, customers, and even third-party developers to build on us.
Cool.
And so it's beginning, but it's still initial phases where we are seeding the system right now, but I'm sure this will mushroom. So yeah. I can tell you the app adoption is tremendous. I think it's almost exponential. Every month we track our monthly usage metrics from customers, and it's just phenomenal. So that tells you something's working.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to be, there's going to be a lot of interest from the community, and it's going to be interesting to see what people come up with. You just never know what crazy idea someone's trying to solve for, and they're going to be like, hey, I can do it with an app. I'll write it myself. So you talked a little bit about kind of I love the airplane analogy, kind of taking off and understanding where you're headed. What's sort of been have you had any sort of surprise moments, in starting Cohesity or working through this process where you've kind of said, I thought this was going to be this way, but it turned out some way different?
The first surprise was the fact how little innovation was there. I think backups, like I said, has been probably a 30-year-old technology. Everyone who has data needs backups. And yet there is so little innovation in this space. That was the first surprising thing. The second surprising thing was that how legacy and arcane the products were that were doing backups. Mm-hmm. There was no scalability. If you fill up a product that was doing backups, you can't scale that into a bigger system. You have to either do forklifts, which means throwing away that thing and getting a bigger one, or basically setting up another silo or island, which was independent of the first one. And then if you fill up that, there's a third one and a fourth one. And so this is the world people lived in. And upgrading software was hard. Downtime was needed to upgrade software. If you need to grow the system, there was downtime. If you need to recover data, it was tough. And it just sat there like an insurance policy. By the way, that was the light bulb moment where I kind of realized that there's a company here. When I asked the question, why are backups just an insurance policy? Why don't people do more with them? It's a perfectly good piece of infrastructure with good CPUs, hardware, disks, network cards, and yet it's something that sits there like an insurance policy, giving you peace of mind. And so that was a big surprise that people haven't thought of leveraging this infrastructure for doing something more. And so a number of these surprises, which led me to build this company. Now, a surprise as we were building This was I haven't had a prior company where I built backups. And so the first surprise was how big the surface area is. Backups, have a tremendous surface area. Like I said earlier, you have to back up virtualized equipment, you have to back up NAS, you have to back up physical servers, you have to back up Oracle, you have to back up SQL Server. So, the surface area is just immense, and that was a big surprise. Never seen a area where the surface area is this big.
Yeah, you probably were looking at it going, oh my God, I didn't even know there's this operating system too. There's, yeah, everything come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, it's, coming, you build, naively thinking, you think that, okay, you build a web scale file system and that's it, right? There's so much more that goes into, all the backup software that you have to put on top. It has to be distributed.
You were giving me flashbacks when you were talking about building another silo, because as you scale up, you had to just keep adding more and more of these things that didn't talk to each other. You couldn't search across them, but it was the only way to scale. It was painful.
Those were the surprises. In the legacy world, people are tolerating that complexity, and they have like dedicated staff, and they have people who build their careers on somehow keeping all that running with duct tape. It's just amazing. And so that was a big surprise that people in this day and age when everyone is moving towards simplicity and easy manageability, they were still managing a very complex backup system.
So Mohit, I've been sitting here while you were describing that. I have to tell you, my mind wandered back to your earlier comment about extending the platform with third-party applications or apps. And to me, that's utterly fascinating. And, what it makes me wonder is I'm trying to think through the list of things that I've looked at, but there's a CyberScan from Tenable, for example. They've produced an app that extends your platform. Can you walk me through, or are you familiar with the value that they hope matriculates to them from developing against the platform? I'd like to understand how that cycle works from your perspective.
Absolutely. So from our side, the value is clear. We have data on the platform that comes on the platform through backups. And we can now provide additional value to the customer through, you mentioned the CyberScan app, which is something that, it works in tandem with Tenable, and it can do vulnerability scans, right? It tells you if you're missing some security patches or if you might be vulnerable to something, a virus scan attack or a ransomware attack, something like that. From Tenable's side, imagine when they're selling, they have to find use cases. If they have to find a customer, they have to install their product, get to the data, demonstrate the value. But here, we bring the data to them. We are partnered with them. Every backup pretty much has a snapshot of the data throughout the data center. So they're getting all the data. Let's say we go to a big financial institutions. If Tenable goes there on their own, they probably are looking at many siloed products and trying to protect them one by one. Now, all of them now get backed up to Cohesity. And so now Tenable can attack all of them in one place. And so it basically becomes an easy go-to-market for Tenable to just kind of partner with us and go along with us. So that's the value for Tenable. There's
another aspect of the Cohesity platform which absolutely fascinates me. And I'd like to ask you to expand on it a little bit, which is you're designing a file system that can scale really, really big if you need it to. And so in order to accomplish that, you have to think, I'm inferring or I'm guessing that you've had to stop and think about how you isolate the failure domains underneath it of the individual components. And would you be willing to share with us any thoughts that you had around that? Has any of your background exposed you to isolating failure domains? That's how I think about it. You probably have a more sophisticated.
When we started our discussion, I drew an analogy to Google. And I said that Google internally is a platform, but that platform isn't just one web scale file system spanning the whole world. It's impractical, right? Because what about failure domains? And so what Google did internally was it split up that file system into cells and then made all those cells look like one logical platform through a level of manageability. And we are doing something very similar. So we leave it in the hands of customers, how big they want that failure domain to be. But once they've chosen that, let's say they want a failure domain to be 100 nodes. So that's one Cohesity cluster. And they can build another Cohesity cluster now, but make it look like one logical platform through this level of manageability that we call Helios. It's our single UI, our single pane of glass, if you may. It runs as a SaaS service in the cloud. It can also run on-premise for customers that don't want to run it in the cloud. And that's the key to making it all look like one platform. So now we've split the failure domains, but yet you can manage it simply through one single pane of glass. So that's the key behind keeping the failure domain separate and containable and manageable, and yet you don't lose the ease of management.
Those external applications sometimes can be, they take on a whole life of their own as far as performance needs and everything. I remember back a few years ago building some of those kinds of things, and you end up needing so much infrastructure sometimes to do file scanning or some of the stuff. It was like more than the production environment was
right.
This whole analytics system. And I was going, wait a second, this is just not right. You can't spend more money on the on this supporting app.
It's one more vendor, or maybe multiple more vendors, right? Maybe one for hardware, one for software. It's more licenses to manage, another UI to manage, more admins that you have to put on it, another copy of your data, right? And you're right, it kind of takes a life of its own. And now you got to manage the ETL, putting the data, removing the data, making sure it's secure. It's just a whole mess.
And
why
people,
not?
People that are asking about backing that data up, and you're going, oh no.
There you go again. So we have this phrase, the philosophy we have, it's captured by this phrase called move compute to the data, not the data to the compute. Yeah. Because if you think about the legacy world, the example that we just took, people are taking the data from one silo and copying it out to another silo to do something with it. And that's moving data to the compute. And in this day and age, when data is growing the way it is, it's prohibitively hard to just always copy around the data. Why not keep the data in one place and create logical clones of that, and then download those apps from our marketplace and run them in place? That's moving compute to the data, not the data to the compute, right? It's much easier to move the compute around, much harder to move the data around. So that's been our philosophy.
Let's shift gears a little bit to some kind of leadership topics. You talked about hiring top talent, and I know you have some really interesting thoughts around how you conduct interviews and who participates in an interview that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I think the first thought I would say is how do you even go about doing an interview? And so this is here's a bad way. The bad way is that a person comes and you barely even know whether the person is even a fit for the role, right? And so you have something like 7 or 8 people spending time on the interviews, even when the person may not even be a fit for the role. So you wasted a lot of time, both for that poor person and also for your interviewing team. And then worse, your team talks to the person and they're like, oh, great guy. I had a great chat with the person. But can the person do the job? How do you know? And so, the traditional interviewing model is extremely flawed. And I tell you, I don't want to act like I'm a know-it-all, but I've learned it the hard way. I've made those mistakes myself. So my interviewing philosophy, I think I've learned over the years, I think of that as dividing your job description, if you may, into 3 checklists. The first one is what I called a pre-interview checklist. So it's the stuff that's going to be, you're going to be looking for those things against the resume itself, right? So maybe you want that person to have worked in a startup, or maybe if you're hiring in sales, you want that person to have done X million in revenue, whatever it is, whatever that checklist is, you need to define that. Once you're like, okay, this is a viable candidate, and you do want to move forward with the interview, now you have the second checklist, and this goes deeper. This may, start looking at, is this a culture match? Did this person close big enterprise accounts if you're interviewing a sales for a sales role, and blah blah blah. And once you have that satisfied, then the third checklist kicks in, which is a post-interview checklist, which is mainly used during reference checks. And I'm pretty gung-ho on doing reference checks from, well, not only the people who might have been ex-bosses and whatnot, but specifically from a person's peers and their ex-reports. Because in my experience, those guys don't lie. If the ex-bosses can sometimes hide the red flags, whereas peers and people who report to the candidate, they have little incentive to hide the red flags.
Mm-hmm.
And so between this, you can truly, identify the hit rates can be really high. And then of course the team needs to be relevant. You don't just call anyone to interview. You call people who are intimately familiar with the role and they know how to interview for that checklist, right? So you, let's say that you're looking for 20 things. Now, no one person can look for all 20. That's another mistake. What you do is you divide up. Maybe, hey, Mr. X, can you interview for these 4 items on the checklist? And the other guy interviews for the maybe the remaining 5 or yet another. So you divvy up the work between the interviewers. And now between all the interviewers, you have a fairly good idea of whether this person is a fit for the role or not. And I call it a checklist, but we actually give it a score between 1 and 4. And the winning candidate is the one who gets the highest score, basically, right? So now between all these interviewers and between all these checklists, the probability of going, you can still go wrong, but the probability becomes very low. So we've had quite a high hit rate, every time we adopt this philosophy. We call it competency-based hiring, because all the checklist items are called competencies, right? We're looking for competencies, and we score them. And as long as we have enough eyes that score a particular competency, the likelihood of all of them being misled is kind of low. And so we end up getting people who are not underqualified, not overqualified. They kind of completely match the requirement that we're looking for.
How do you balance that of being in the trenches versus actually kind of over seeing everything that's happening, or trying to see as much as you can and all that?
Yeah. So let's say the first job of a CEO is to be an inspector, and then you inspect and then you find something's wrong. Then you go deep and get in the trenches there. But you go in with the idea that you have to fix whatever is wrong and then come out. Because if you stay in the trenches for an extended period of time, your inspection duties are going to suffer, right? And so while you are always working in the trenches, you change trenches quite often, because you fix what's there in one trench. Either it's show the way to the leader there, or put another leader on top, or what have you. And then you come out of that trench and then you say, okay, what else is wrong? And then you get into that trench. And so you're kind of always inspecting and quickly going into trenches and climbing out. You're never kind of sitting there in the trench for a long time. So that's how you're going to balance.
So keep moving all the time. Keep moving.
All the time. It's a tiring job.
I love it.
Get cast in a trench. Yeah.
Well, Mohit, really, really appreciate you coming on today and spending an hour with us. It's been really, really great. Appreciate all your insights, and look forward to doing this sometime in person when we can do that again.
Oh, I'm itching for that. Ned and Paul, thank you so much, and especially thanks to all of EVOTEC for their partnership. We have done some great business with you guys, and we hope to look forward and doing way more.
Absolutely.
Pleasure seeing you. Thank you, Paul.
Yep. Thank you, Mohit. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.